All right, all right, all right. We have an amazing episode lined up for you. I am so excited for this one. I actually just recorded it and now I'm coming back to do the intro. And I'm just going to tell you this episode is fire. It's so good. Hopefully, I explained it in a way that makes a lot of sense. But if you've been struggling to convince people that your product is what they need, this should fix everything for you. Look, it's not about convincing them they need you. It's not about using modules and videos and PDFs and downloads to sell. It's about getting people to come to their own conclusions that your process and you are the thing that they need. And what we find is this makes the offer almost irrelevant. If you do combine this with an irresistible offer, it's game over. It is done. You're going to make sales. So this process right here can help you build an audience. It can help you generate sales. It's going to give you high performing and high converting ads and more. I'm so excited for it. So let's just roll the episode. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm really excited for today's episode. As you may or may not know, hopefully you do know, we've been evolving our program, especially over the last 6 months. We've been coming up with new messaging frameworks. We've been coming up with new styles of messaging, and a lot of our NGM Plus students have actually been deploying a lot of it. And I've been getting a lot of messages from people that are like, "Hey, Brandon, followed your framework and got 200 DMs from people wanting to work with me. We've gotten emails from people wanting to work with me." In fact, today I did a live stream inside of our Facebook group, and I even had someone tell me that they had 250 messages over the weekend from people wanting to work with them. And so the concept is this, and we have 4 different quadrants of content that we like to use in order to get our message out there. And what I believe is if you want to create content that creates demand, pulls people in, and wants them to buy before you even make an offer, there's a bunch of elements that need to happen. And what we have found is those elements, you may have heard like the know, like, and trust, right? But there's 2 sorts of trust that need to be developed. People need to trust you as a person and a human. And then people also need to trust in your ability to solve their problem. If people don't trust in your ability to solve their problem, then they're just never going to buy. And if they don't trust you or like you as a person, they're also not going to buy. So, if you've been a listener of the podcast for a while, you may have heard me talk about these different quadrants. They were 3 for a really long time, and we just added in a 4th. And basically the 3 are this. There's thought reversal content, which allows you to be a standout. It allows you to be a thought leader. It allows you to be the change maker inside of your space. It allows you to shift people's perspective, get people to see things they didn't see before. It allows you to be the person who makes them aware of mistakes they're making without them realizing they were mistakes. It allows you to go against the grain. But again, all those add up to you becoming the thought leader, someone who is different, someone who is creating change. The next one that you want to focus on is what we call connection content. The intention behind this is that people start to like you because of your values, because of who you are, your beliefs, what you stand for. This is talking about your deeper purpose. Again, not the result you bring, which a lot of people think is their purpose, but your deeper purpose. So again, if you're a copywriter, a lot of people say, well, I help people write impactful copy and get their messages out to the world. That's my purpose. I'm like, no, that's a result that happens when they work with you. A deeper purpose is when 10,000 people have that result. Now what is created in the world? Now, what this sort of content does, it allows you to get heard, can build connection with your audience on the deepest level possible. We want to incorporate things like our values, our beliefs, identities, stuff like that. And when you look at your best friend or your spouse, you probably didn't have to think about whether or not you like them, you probably just felt it automatically, right? You're just like, oh my God, I really just vibe with this person, or I get this person, or even like your best friends. Like I look at some of my best friends now, we have so many identities and beliefs that are in alignment that we just really vibe with that person, quote unquote vibe or connect. And again, the reason why you connect with them without having to think about it is because of shared values, identities, and beliefs. So we want content that allows us to do that with our audience. The next phase of content is educational. I know I speak kind of against educational, but I kind of want to bring some clarity to that. We need educational content. Where I draw the line is I don't think we should be doing educational content 100% of the time. Some people can get away with it, but 95% of us cannot. And the reason why is because we blend in with everyone else. You start to sound like everyone else. The other thing is when we do educational content, you don't want to do it 100% of the time. You don't want to do tutorials 100% of the time. So if we look at these three quadrants, we have thought reversals. We have three different ways to do thought reversals. When we look at connection, we have multiple ways to do connection. We have educational content. We have 5 different ways to do educational content. Tutorials are one of them. We also we use personally inside of our program and inside of our philosophy, we have something called the persuasive tutorial, which is doing a tutorial and educating, but keeping it super persuasive and like mind-blowing. There is a way to do that. So even when we do educational content, which could be anywhere from 25 to 50% of your content, you still want tutorials to be a small fraction of that. And there's so many other ways to educate. Think of like a TED Talk or a best-selling book. They all have really engaging, mind-blowing ways to teach and educate that don't rely on boring tutorials. Even the way you title those things should be different, speak to identities and things like that. Now, this third one that we're going to dive into today is what I call diagnosing or self-identifying content. It is something we've been playing around with over the last year. It is something that when I reveal what it is, you'll start to see it all over the place. There's so many people that do this. A lot of people that blow up really fast are doing this really well. But basically what this style of content does, or this style of messaging, what it does is it gets your audience to feel heard. It gets them to feel understood. It builds trust in your ability to solve the problem for them. Which, remember, is the second sort of trust that I said you need. You need trust, like likability trust. They need to trust you as a human being, but they also need to trust in your ability and in your process to get them the result. If they like you as a person and they trust you as a person, but they don't trust in your process or your ability, they're not going to buy as well. This process I'm about to run you through allows you to build trust in your ability to solve the problem. And I think the most important part is there's no convincing, there's no luring, there's no begging people to take the next step or buy from you. What's beautiful about this style of messaging and content is you get people to come up with their own conclusions that you are the person for them, and they won't go to anyone else. So just to give you guys a couple examples of people that do this really well, the holistic psychologist, if anyone follows her, she's very good at this sort of content. The holistic psychologist is not the first person to come up with stress syndromes like fight, flight. I think it's called stress syndromes. I don't know. But you know what I'm talking about, the fawn response or stress responses. That's what it is. Stress responses, so like fight or flight, fawn, or the other one, fawn, fight, flight. Some of you guys are probably yelling at your computer or speakers right now. Freeze, fawn, freeze, flight, and fight. She's not the first person to come up with that. She's not the first person to talk about childhood trauma. She's not the first person to talk about attachment styles. However, when you consume her content, you read it and you start to self-diagnose yourself, or you start to say, oh my God, I have that problem she's talking about. She starts to give answers or explanations to things that you've just dealt with because no one's ever explained it to you. And I'm going to give you guys some examples towards the end of this podcast of how this makes sense. But if you really look at her content, she doesn't really ever explain what to do to fix the problem. She doesn't really educate you by delivering information. She educates you by bringing awareness to areas that didn't have awareness before. And that's key. Understanding where your audience is at, where their awareness is, and how to raise their awareness to issues, things, mistakes, actions, or problems or situations that are causing issues in their life that they were unaware of, and making them aware of it is incredibly value adding. So I'm going to run you guys through a scenario here. And if you've been inside my circle for a while, you've probably heard this before. If you're a student, especially in NGM Plus, you've heard this for sure 1.5 million times. So if that's you, just bear with me while I go through it one more time for the people that have not heard me say this before. But I want you to think about a doctor. And I want you to imagine for 1 second that you have developed this pain in your stomach. And it's been going on for 2 weeks. You have no idea why it happened or what caused it. It starts at 7:30 at night, which is totally weird and random. You go to 5 or 10 doctors. Let's say you've gone to 10 doctors, and no doctor has really known what it is. They don't really know what it is. So what they're going to do is they're going to say, well, it kind of sounds like you might have this, and it sounds like you kind of might have this, and you might kind of have this. I'm going to give you a prescription. Let's see if it helps. How confident are you going to be in their solution? How much trust are you going to have in that prescription or solution if those are the doctors you go to? Probably not a lot. You may try it and it may or may not work, but chances are it probably won't work. And that's the equivalent of going to some course or course creator or someone, and you're like, I think this is probably going to work, and and it just doesn't work because that course creator didn't get very clear on the problem that they're solving. So let's keep going with this analogy here. Let's imagine you go to the 11th doctor, and the 11th doctor takes one look at you and they go, oh, you know what? Let me guess. You have stomach pain that starts at 7:30 at night, don't you? And let me guess, it probably started 2 weeks ago. You're going to go, oh my God. Yes, that's exactly what I have. Now, what I want you to realize in that moment is how value adding that actually is for that person. Like if that was you, how relieved would you feel when you finally feel like someone understands your specific situation? Probably a lot. And I want you to imagine what your audience will also feel when you give them that same experience. How would they feel when you give them that same exact experience? Probably over the moon and excited. And when people look at the holistic psychologist's content, that's what she does. She gives these explanations to these symptoms, to these problems they've been experiencing sometimes their entire life, and that they have no idea why things happen. You know, like, why do I over-explain on calls? Or why do I talk really loudly here? Or why do I yell at my kids when blah, 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 blah? You know, these are just things that people deal with that no one's ever explained before. And then when someone finally comes in and explains it to them, it's like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. Now let's go a step further with this. What does the doctor do next? The doctor now diagnose you. They say you have X, Y, and Z. Right? So when you look at the holistic psychologist's content, she goes, okay, you have childhood trauma, or you have like the fawn response or the flight response. But I want you guys to recognize something. Someone at some point had to create the term childhood trauma. Someone had to discover that. Someone had to create the 4 different stress responses: fawn, freeze, flight, fight. They didn't exist 1,000 years ago. Someone at some point had to realize there's this thing going on where people have these symptoms. I'm going to give it a name. When you give problems a name, you can diagnose people with it. You can diagnose your audience with those things. You can be the person who discovers these things and creates these things, right? Now let's go back to that example. You've had that pain. The doctor looks at you and they tell you exactly what you've had. You go, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I have. You feel a sense of relief. They say you had the 7:30 p.m. stomach flu. You go, oh doctor, I've never heard of that thing. You say, yep, it's a new thing. A lot of people are starting to get it. I can tell just by how you look that you have it. And you go, oh my gosh, I have this. You start to say it yourself. You come to your own conclusion. I have the 7:30 stomach flu. You agree with the doctor, right? So then what happens is let's just pretend the doctor walks away and goes, oh, well, now you know what you have. See you later. What are you going to do? You're going to stop the doctor and say, how do I fix it? Keep in mind, the doctor hasn't told you what the solution is. They haven't taught you the solution. They haven't educated you except raising your awareness to what you have and making you feel heard. If that doctor just sat there and goes, yep, that's what you have, and doesn't say anything to you, your next question out of your mouth is going to be, how do I fix it? Basically, they're going to say, what's the solution? How do I work with you? This concept is the same thing with your marketing. When you look at people like the holistic psychologists, even people like Brene Brown, Mel Robbins, this is the style of content they're all doing. And I'm going to give you guys some examples so you can see how this works at the very end of this episode. But this is how you start to get people DMing you, asking, how do I work with you? And basically what you're doing is you're demonstrating through your communication, I understand specifically, and that's the key here, is it has to be specific and it has to be accurate, specifically what you're doing. Here's specifically what you're doing. Here's specifically what you're doing to cause the problem, so mistakes that cause the problem. And here's specifically what you're doing to try to fix it that doesn't work. So again, there's specific problems, specific mistakes causing the problems, and specific mistakes they try to do to fix the problem that do not work. And then if you can name all of those things, if you're doing all of that, you are in what I call, for me, I use the content circle of death. You could use anything you want. Come up with your own terminology, your own name. And then you start to incorporate this into content, and then people start to come up with their own conclusion. Oh my God, I have this thing. I'm stuck in the content circle of death. Now, when you get your audience to identify on their own that they're stuck in a certain name or cycle or problem, they aren't going to go to someone else and try to figure it out. That would be the same thing as you having that stomach flu thing. The doctor tells you exactly what you have and you say, thanks, doc. I'm going to go get a second opinion and I'm going to go find someone else to help me fix this problem. No, you're not going to go search someone else out to try to fix the problem. You're going to ask that doctor, what is the solution? What is the prescription? What do I do? What's the treatment? Again, same thing. Now, when you come up with your own terminology and you can get your audience to go, oh my gosh, I have this, and they're using the terminology that you created, they literally can't go to someone else to fix it because you're the only person who can fix it because you're the one who discovered the problem. You're the one who named the problem. It's the same thing of like the person who invented or discovered, not invented, but discovered anxiety. At some point they realized, wow, there's all these people with these symptoms. There's this thing going on. I'm going to name it anxiety. And when they first discovered it, they're probably the only person who could treat anxiety because they're the ones who created it. Now, if you do a great job with this, the problems that you uncover could actually potentially become industry standards, kind of like anxiety is now an industry standard sort of thing that people can get diagnosed as. But that's kind of the goal here of what we want to do. And that's again, one quadrant of content. So imagine you have that quadrant of content, you have connection content, you have 5 different ways of doing educational content, you have thought reversals going out. Like you start to create this ecosystem of messaging and content. You can bring it into webinars, into ads. And this right here, this messaging is how we've been able to spend over $3 million in ads with every single dollar being profitable. This is how we're able to, build our email list to over 100,000 people. Every time we send an email out, we always get people asking how they can work with us, all of that stuff. So I want to run you through a couple ways, steps that you can do to start to create this. Now I'm going to just be really upfront and honest with you guys. It may sound very easy to just do this and post it. And I am aware that as one of the skills that I have is taking things that could potentially be complex and making them and breaking them down very easy. But I don't want to misguide you guys and have you be like, this is super simple. I'm going to figure it out in 2 hours and I'm good to go. No, this is something that you're always going to be testing. I don't know, and you won't know what problems work until you do it. And you also don't know what phrasing is going to work the best. Okay. But the first step to this, so I guess what I'm saying is it may take work. There are some of you guys who will be able to crush this on your very first post and get DMs. Like that happens to a lot of people, but there's some people that like you're going to have to take 5 attempts before you get something that gets any traction at all. And it's just trial and error. And even if you get one that works, you're going to be able to find ones that work better in the future. Okay. So the very first thing we want to do is you need to truly understand who you're going after. And I don't think a lot of people do this. I think a lot of people, and this might be you, focus on their skills and their knowledge, and then they try to teach those skills and knowledge, and that communication style never leads to sales and engagement. And I think what people do is they say, here's everything that I know. Here's the transformation that this thing will bring. But what they never ask is, who is this for? And what problems, and this is the most important one, what problems does that person have? What specific problems does this fix? And even if you did that and you can't make sales, maybe you picked a problem that people are not willing to pay for. They're okay. They would rather deal with the problem than pay you money. But if you pick a bad enough problem, people will pay for it. For example, if I go to a doctor and the doctor has will fix anything and it's $50,000. If I go in for a scratch my arm and I say, hey doc, can you fix this? They go, yeah, it's $50,000. I'm like, nah, no, I'll just deal with this problem. But if I had cancer and they said, yeah, you're going to die in like 2 days, but for $50,000, I can help you. Guess what? I'm paying the $50,000 because it's a very severe problem. So sometimes some of us, even when we pick problems, we just pick problems that people aren't willing to pay for, or people don't see as a big enough problem to spend the time, energy, or money to get fixed. They're just okay dealing with it. And so again, there's twofold. You either don't know the problems you solve, or you picked problems that people are okay dealing with. So when you understand who that person is, a lot of people will look at that and go like, well, they're, make up some avatar profile. Oh, it's this person, they're a mom, they make this much money, blah, 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 blah. But what you never ask is, what problem do the people I want to work with, the people that I want to attract, what problem are they experiencing right now that my skills and knowledge can solve? And to be honest with you guys, you just need one. You need one major problem, one specific thing. Here's the difference between a specific problem and a generalized problem. A generalized problem is open to interpretation. If I said you're overwhelmed, and I said that to 10 people, I'm gonna get 10 different ways in which they're overwhelmed. So if we talk about moms, for example, if I said you're an overwhelmed mom, well, there's 10 different ways that moms can be overwhelmed. Well, that's actually a lot more than 10, but you know what I mean. I asked 10 different moms, they're all going to give me different answers. But if I said something like, you're tired of having to yell at your kids a minimum of 3 times every morning to try to get them out of the door and on school on time. There's no room for interpretation. You're either going through that experience or you're not. No interpretation. So for me, I ask myself, what is an unwanted experience that the person I want to attract is going through right now? And what's beautiful about this is you get to attract people that you want, number one, because you're choosing problems the people you want to work with have. For example, if I wanted to work with $1 million business owners, I would only talk about messaging problems that $1 million business owners are experiencing. And what's beautiful about it is now you're attracting people who have the very specific problem that your program is designed to fix. So you get the best people coming into your ecosystem now. But the beautiful part about it is they feel heard, seen, and their subconscious automatically goes, that person understands me, they get me. Their trust in your ability to solve the problem goes through the roof. So you have to get clear on those things. You have to understand who they are, what the problems are, what the specific mistakes are, and what the specific mistakes they are to create the problem. And then the next thing is you're going to have to test what works. You're going to test all of them. Even if you pick a problem, you're going to test different ways to phrase it. Testing is like a number one theme inside of our program and our philosophy. You never know what's going to work until you try it. Our ads, for example, I would say we're pretty good with ads. We're pretty good with messaging. 25% of our ads will work. And that's a pretty good ratio from what I hear. 25% will work. That also means 75% will not work. That means every 4 ads we create, 3 of them will not work. I don't know what's going to work. You don't know what's going to work. We have to try and test and put things out there and let the behavior of our audience and the data dictate and tell us what is working and what needs to change and how to adjust it. So we try again and we try again and we try again and try again. If you don't have a webinar that works, great, try again. You don't have content that works, great, try again. You don't have messaging that works, try again. And so the way even our program works is I guide you 90% of the way. The last 10% is basically testing, and you test within our bumpers. We put bumpers out there on how to test and how to analyze and so we speed up the process in which you get effective content and messaging. But it doesn't mean you don't test, because even on my own stuff, I still don't know what's going to work. I have to test it out. Okay, step number 3 is once you start to test, you want to start placing this in diagnosing or self-identifying frameworks. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all of what these are. We have several of them in our program. We give a couple of them out for free as well. But basically, the very simple way to do this is to say, if you are, I'll just give you an example. If you're a stay-at-home mom who's tired of yelling at your kids, you may be stuck in the yell cycle. Here's what happens if you're stuck inside the yell cycle. And then you're just going to list 3 specific problems. And then these would be swipers or those carousel sort of things on Instagram. The next slide will say something like, and if you're experiencing these problems, you likely are making these mistakes, and you list the mistakes, and then another swiper. And then you say something like, and then if you're making these mistakes, I'm willing to bet you're trying these mistakes to try to fix it that don't work. And you list the mistakes they're trying to fix it that don't work. And then your call to action will be something like, and don't worry, there's hope. We've helped over 400 moms just like you overcome this process through our courses in our program, which is important. You have to say through our courses in our program. DM us to see if you're someone we can help. DM us to see if you're someone we can help. Okay. Now, the reason why that works is you want to put your social proof in there. We've helped over 400 moms overcome this problem through our courses and programs, because you want them to know we're going to have a conversation about my courses and programs, and you don't want them expecting coaching for free in the DMs. DM me to see if you're someone we can help. So now they're going to be DMing you, hopefully getting you to help them. So again, there's a couple things that are going to happen when we go through that post, is that they're going to start to self-identify. I have exactly what they're talking about. I am stuck in that yelling cycle. That is my problem. You just diagnosed them, right? If you're accurate and specific, their subconscious is going to go, oh my God, they're talking about you. They know your situation. The trust in your ability to solve the problem goes through the roof. And then bam, that's it. So you can use that in an email. You can use that in ads. In fact, some of our best performing ads are using this kind of format, or a variation of this format. Best emails are using this format. Best content is using this format. But I want to read a couple examples for you guys here. So I'm going to go through a couple examples and show you guys kind of how this works. Because again, you can use so many different variations of this. And you can mix it up and match it with different things to get it to work really well. So I have one here on my phone. I should have pulled it up before, so you guys aren't just listening to me talk and yammer on. Well, I try to find it here, but I'll find it here in a second. I know there's another one that the holistic psychologist used that I use all the time. Here it is. Okay. And so she has a post that is titled 5 adult behaviors stemming from childhood trauma, or something along those lines. And what is so great about that is that what's about to happen, most people don't recognize this, but what's about to happen is once she starts to go through what those adult behaviors are, if she accurately and specifically describes those adult behaviors and you recognize, oh my God, I'm doing one of them, your subconscious automatically goes, you have childhood trauma. She's getting you to come to your own conclusion that you have childhood trauma. She's not trying to convince you. She's not trying to educate you through a tutorial on what childhood trauma is. She's not saying, doing that sort of thing. She's literally raising your awareness to why these adult behaviors that you have exist. And she's saying that it's childhood trauma, and she's getting you to come to your own conclusion. And she's basically diagnosing you, and she's getting you to come to your own conclusion that is the problem you have. But then she doesn't provide you the solution. So then she creates a demand for her solution. And I would say 90% of her content probably does this. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's what it feels like. And about 10% of it is educating on the solution. So that's one way that's one example right there. Okay. So she does something like 5 human or adult patterns or behaviors that you have if you're suffering from childhood trauma or something like that, and then just goes through 5 specific scenarios where adult patterns where childhood trauma caused. Okay, that's one. Here's another one. This one's from Kerwin Ray. He's kind of like the adult, or not the adult, well, he is an adult, but the Australian Gary Vee is kind of like what he's like. So here's the title of his content. And again, you can do this just with Instagram images. Like, it's super easy, just images. And you can do them as emails and stuff too. But here's what his says. Warning signs you are exhausted mentally, or warning signs you are mentally exhausted. So now what's about to happen is he's going to go through these warning signs. And if you have one of them, you're going to go, oh my God, I'm mentally exhausted. And then if he had a product on how to help mentally exhausted people, guess what? Bam, he just created demand for his product. So here's what it is. Number 1, you are easily irritated. Number 2, you feel completely unmotivated to do things you normally enjoy. Number 3, you're experiencing anxiety or panic attacks. Number 4, you feel very emotional or cry unexpectedly. Number 5, you have unexplained pain in your body or feel sick. Number 6, you feel detached and disconnected or empty. Now here's the last line. Self-care is about what you do, not what you say. Now I want to point out something here. There's a couple things going on here. At the top, it says warning signs you are mentally exhausted. He goes through the warning signs. If one of those warning signs hit, or if multiple of them hit, oh my gosh, even better. You now start to go, am I mentally exhausted? I must be mentally. He's describing me. He's talking about me. I'm mentally exhausted. But the last line, self-care is about what you do, not what you say. That last line is where most people create content. Most people will they're a self-care expert, so they post, bam, these statements. They just post a statement as if you're going to believe them, just like the audience is just going to believe you because you think you're the expert. So most people will just have an image and post it. If you're a self-care expert, post it online and they'll just say, self-care is about what you do, not what you say. Bam. Oh, look at me. I'm so smart and edgy and going against the grain. It's like, yeah, but no one cares. Like, you didn't build any rapport with anyone. You didn't get them to a place to admit that they need self-care. You didn't get them to come there. You're preaching at them. You're explaining to them. We want to persuade. We want to influence. We want to communicate in a way where people come to their own conclusions. Wow, that's me. Wow, this person gets me. Wow, this is my expert that I want to follow. This is the person who understands me in my situation. This is the person who can help me. So what he does is he goes through all of these things, and then bam, he makes a statement afterwards, after he's already gotten you to a place where you're like, oh my God, that's me. And then now you're at a completely different level of awareness. You're at a completely different level of rapport. You're at a completely different level, even emotionally, when that power statement actually comes. And most people just run around posting power statements over the place, and it doesn't really land the way that they want it to. So that is what we call getting your audience to come to their own conclusions that you're the answer. I call this self-diagnosing or self-identifying content. We do talk about it in the program. We especially dive into it in NGM+. But I want to go one step further with this. One of the things that you have to keep in mind when doing this that is really powerful is you can actually start to create your own terminology. So you can start to create your own terminology within your brand. So, like the Kerwin one, he talks about he's mentally exhausted. So I would have probably said something like, warning signs you're stuck in the mentally exhausted loop or something like that. At least add the word loop. And then now it becomes a part of his methodology or his terminology or his philosophy of like, okay, now the mentally exhausted loop. He can actually give solutions like, here's how to get out of the mentally exhausted loop. Bam, that's another piece of content, right? It's a how-to content. So now you have a self-diagnosing piece of content, and now you have a how-to content. He could follow up the following day with like, bam, here's the next piece of content, but it's all his terminology, which brings consistency to your messaging. So some of the ways in which you can create your own terminology will be around like problem names. So like much like the flight response, fight response, freeze response, fawn response, those are all problems, but they all have their own name. So that is one way you can create your own terminology, is creating the problems that you know resonate with your audience and giving each problem its own name. Your solution can have its own name. We talk about that in the program. Your unique solution, your philosophy, your process, all of that stuff. Like thought reversals, for example. It's part of one of my 4 quadrants. I made it up. I discovered it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this works really well. People are using this without realizing it. Like, I'm going to give it a name. Same thing with self-diagnosing or self-identifying content. I started to recognize the holistic psychologists and other people were doing this, maybe even unintentionally. I realized that and I gave it a name. I'm calling it self-identifying content. So I have my own terminology around solutions. The next one is observation names. So if you have an observation, you could be like, I'm observing this thing that I'm calling X, Y, and Z. And that could be situations or mistakes. For me, I could call like this, an observation I'm making is that when most people are stuck, they're relying on a lot of education. So I can call it like, I'm observing this thing I'm calling the education plateau, where these entrepreneurs are posting, mostly educational content and they just become plateaued even though they're posting gold. So now I created my own terminology of an observation, right? So there's a couple different ways you can start to create your own terminology, and this is how we create very unique messaging. This is also how we start to put you in your own space. So for me, I'm not the only messaging expert, but when a lot of people hear me talk, in their mind, I become the only messaging expert, and I become the only messaging expert in their mind because the way in which I communicate to them is so unique and so different that no one else can compete or be in the same category as me. And I don't mean a better category. I just mean a different category, because I'm by no means think I'm the best messaging expert out there or the best communication expert, but I don't need to be the best. I just need to be different, and I need to be unique, and I need to bring ahas. And I want you to see me as the different and unique messaging expert. I want you to see me as someone who communicates in a way that and teaches in a way that you don't see anyone else doing. Because then I position myself as being in their own field, and creating your own terminology is what allows you to do that. Now, again, in order to accomplish all this, we need testing, we need trial and error, but you also need to have mastery and experience over your craft. You need to be the best at what you do, or strive to be the best at what you do. Constantly learning, ton of experience, and when all this comes together, you start to position yourself as being in your own field. So with that being said, this is a process that we go through inside of NGM Plus in more detail, with more support, one-on-one calls, group calls, all that stuff. We are opening up Cart, I believe, next week. I'm sure we're going to have ads on it here in a second. We also go through it inside of NGM, the normal flagship program as well. And if you feel like this makes sense to you and you need help, there's one thing I've noticed through all these webinars we've been doing on a weekly basis is that, like I've heard advice from people like James Wedmore and other people that says like people will buy in multiple launches. And what I've come to realize is that it's not that people need to go through multiple launches before they buy. It's actually that people need to see the offer a certain amount of times before they buy. And here's the reason why. What we have realized through our all the things we've been doing inside of our business is we've realized that when people, recognize that they have the problem that you solve, which is why this content is so great, because you get people to recognize they have the problem you solve. And when they trust you and your process to fix the problem, and you present them with an offer and they say no, they will only say no a certain amount of times before they finally say yes. Which means that if you can speed up the amount of times that they see the offer, at the same time they know they have the problem and know that you can solve the problem, and they continue to say no, and then they continue to experience the problem, it's just a matter of time before they say yes. And if you can speed up the process of how many times they say the answer, you speed up the process to getting a yes. That's what we've kind of discovered here. So with that being said, I'm about to flip it on you, because Cart's about to open. If you know you have the problem that we solve and you trust my ability in it, don't be the person that needs to say no multiple times before you finally get in. Because all it's going to do is delay the results that you can have. All it's going to do is make sure that you continue. There's only one guarantee if you make the decision not to get in. It's a guarantee that you're going to continue to have the problem unless you figure it out yourself. or go to some other person. If you think there's another person who can help the problem faster than I can, you should probably go to them. That's totally fine with me. I want you to get the problem solved. But with card opening up, I don't want you to be that person. I don't want you to be the person who recognizes I have this problem. I know this person can solve the problem. I know if I get this problem fixed, a lot of things will be fixed in my business. Don't be the person who continues to say no. Because I'm telling you, it's just a matter of time before you finally say yes. So with that being said, hopefully we'll see you guys inside the program. I'm really excited. We're going places with this program. We got some cool bonuses, things that I'm going to be adding in over this next year. I don't want to speak too soon on them, but we're going to be adding in some more training, and we have a lot more resources coming on top of what you're already getting. So like I said, like this philosophy that I just ran you through today, we've been working on this for over a year. We have some things that we've been working on for the last couple months. Again, everything that I teach is based off of experience, and when it's ready to be released, we will release it. And we got some of those things coming up as well. So I'm really excited. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. I enjoyed giving it to you. It's a weird way to say it, but I enjoyed teaching it to you. And I'll see you all on the next episode. Take care, everyone. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.